What's going on, everyone? My name is Nicholas Merton here at DataDash, and today is October 14th of 2022. Well, folks, I hope you all are having a fantastic day wherever you are, because in today's video, we've got to talk about yesterday's major CPI report coming in hotter than expected with month-over-month inflation of 0.4% versus the expectation of 0.3%. Yet, at the same time, while this was an upset against the crowd's expectation, meaning that inflation is still prevalent, we saw stocks as well as cryptocurrencies taking a pretty big bump up in the market. So I want to spend some time to break this down, talk a little bit about why the market moved up during this news event, and also share my genuine thoughts about where I think things are going forward. If you guys like the video, drop a like and stay tuned later on as we've got an interview with one of our long-term partners, Rokfin, a really exciting content platform that we work with here on the channel. So stay tuned, you won't want to miss it. All right, so let's go ahead and kick off this conversation here, guys. What was first looking like a pretty red day for Bitcoin post the CPI release turned out to be a relatively positive one. We dropped from around $19,100 down to $18,100, moving $1,000 in a matter of less than 24 hours. But in the middle part of the day, after we got the release, we started to see a big bump up here. A move of over 3% in 1 hour, continuing the climb further on here even into this morning, around $20,000 for Bitcoin's price. So a lot of people are curious why this happened here. Why is the market optimistic on a higher than expected inflation rate? Well, this is one of the big tips I want to go ahead and pass on before I even explain what happened here and what the market might be getting excited about. It is important not to trade news events, guys, especially not try to trade crypto on leverage during these events. While yes, you can make a lot of money, you can also lose a lot of money. And I would bet good money here, even though I'll be completely candid. You guys know we're generally bearish on the market here. We think that there is a better chance of things going down over the next coming weeks or months. You all know better than I do that it is so difficult to time these short-term moves here in the market. And one of the biggest takeaways you can take, no matter if you are a bull or a bear or wherever you think things are going, it is important not to get caught up in the general crowded trade in the short term. This is where the market makes a lot of its money, off of short-term day traders or swing traders who are usually going to fall into the emotional pit here. Everyone wants to short Bitcoin when it goes below the line that we have here around $19,000 on the chart. And the market knows this, especially going into these painful events where people are making big bets and people end up just losing a lot of money. So if you take anything away from this video, whether you agree with me or other people on the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin, don't trade the short-term events, okay? Now, the other thing here that I want to dive into is the actual event here. With inflation rising 0.4% according to the CPI in September, we need to talk about why the market might have positively reacted to this news. There are really going to be two things that I want to dive into here today. One of them is the potential expectations that we're moving closer and closer towards an annualized growth rate of 2%, and I'll explain what this basically means. This is, again, the Fed's target for inflation is to get back down to 2%. And on top of that as well, talk about how the increase in housing expenditures, while of course is something we need to consider and what we've been focusing on, also, some people are making the argument that this is going to be short-lived, and I'll explain that, okay? So let's go ahead and just talk a little bit here about the inflation print. On a year-over-year basis, while we did increase over 0.4% here in the month of September for the cost of living, meaning that people are spending a little over 0.5 percentage more this month in September versus what they were doing in August, the annualized growth rate still declined. Year over year, inflation dropped from 8.3% down to 8.2%. Okay, so this is what people are starting to get excited about, because the Federal Reserve has stated here that they need to get down to their annualized inflation target of 2%. And while we've got mixed signals that the Fed would be okay seeing 2% in the PCE, which is another inflation measurement, or the CPI, essentially speaking, when we look at this chart here, we obviously look like we've set in a temporary top and have started to see the effects of the Fed's monetary policy in slowing the economy and therefore slowing demand and the growth of inflation. Now, this is the Fed's goal here. It's its number one goal. While it does care about the labor market and the economy, its number one goal here, as it's stated clearly, is to reduce inflation. Now, I just want to go ahead and share a thought experiment here, because the key first thing that got the markets very optimistic, that led to the reversal here in Bitcoin, that led to the S&P 500 starting to shoot up here and making one of the biggest daily candle reversals I've seen in some time here, coming all the way from the gap down lows here at around 348 on the SPY up to 365. So what caused this here? Again, as we hinted earlier, some people are believing that, considering the current month-over-month growth rates, that realistically, considering we'll probably have some softer months in the future, that most markets are pricing that a year out from now, the annualized rate would be 2% for inflation. That the Fed is moving so aggressively that essentially we are going to get towards a year-over-year growth rate drop from 8% down to 2%. Now, I want to go ahead and make one thing very clear here, and it's a big reason why I disagree with this. We need not look any further than history and previous Fed rate hikes in order to understand just how sticky inflation really is. This report, if anything, similar to the August reports, if I'm not getting my months mixed up, I think it was back in August or potentially July, showed that we still had month-over-month increases in the rate of inflation. Essentially, this means that the inflation is sticky. It's staying around here. And these annualized inflation rates that the Federal Reserve utilizes take a long time to get back down towards their target range. Go ahead and use the 70s here as an example. We're taking a look at a similar time frame here, right? This is past 25 years here for the CPI, right? We've got our inflation wave here now. How did it look back during the 70s? Well, we had three inflationary waves. We had one that came up to 6% and dropped down to around 3%. That took about 3 years to get down to that range. Didn't even hit the target range here. So we got to bear in mind here, right, that the Fed has got to stay consistent. It's got to either increase interest rates or get towards a really high elevated level and hold it there to keep inflation under control, to show that the Fed is in the driver's seat. Let's take a look at the secondary wave here from 1975 down here towards 1977, about 2 years here. And the Fed still didn't get down towards its target rate of 2%. This has been kind of an economist standard here to have 2% inflation. This is monetary, or someone who in this case believe in monetary theory, or would call themselves a monetarist essentially when they talk about their economic viewpoint, right? Getting down to that 2% target. It's what most central banks follow because it's the gold standard of the Fed. And here in the 1980s, when we peaked here at 14% inflation year over year, only then, after 4 to 3.5 years, did we get down close towards the 2% target. And we all know what the Federal Reserve did back then. For those of you who may not know, the Federal Reserve jacked up the federal funds rate to levels the likes of which we have not seen in U.S. history, up to upper double-digit territory, between 15 to 19%. And not to mention, what we've got to consider this time around in order to get inflation down is that the Federal Reserve not only needs to jack up interest rates, but it likely needs to do the hard decision, and that's to reduce its balance sheet significantly. I'm talking about quantitative tightening, balance sheet reduction, rather than quantitative easing, where it added assets to its balance sheet. It needs to start unloading those, taking the cash from the sale of those assets and putting it back on its balance sheet, removing it effectively from the money supply. The Federal Reserve has not been doing this in the month of September. And this is, again, where I think the Fed might get caught trying to play on the tightrope and pivot to please financial markets here. Now, I want to go ahead and highlight one big thing here that makes me, again, confident here that the CPI and the PCE are not going to be really significantly declining anytime soon. Okay, so we talked about the first thesis here. I disagree with it because inflation is highly sticky here, and it takes a long time on those annualized numbers to get down. If anything, we need to start seeing negative month-over-month growth. We need to start seeing what many of the bulls are calling for, which is deflation in the economy. We're still seeing inflated prices. And one of the big things here that I think has got a lot of people feeling that, hey, you know, Nick, maybe you're being a bit too bearish here, right? A lot of the increase is still coming in on shelter costs. So rent, mortgage financing, right? Now, in the case of the CPI, they heavily focus on rental rates, right, in the economy. So rents, as we talked about before, are still getting more painful. They're still going up. What is going on here? Well, what's going on here is because the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates to cool down demand in other sectors of the economy, it is definitely increasing the financing costs of people who have variable rate mortgages or people who are now taking a mortgage to buy out homes. And because of that, those buyers on the market need to match their rents to essentially cover the financing on that. Now, a lot of people make the argument here that this is temporary because eventually it's going to get to a point here where demand starts to slow down. And on top of that, the Fed will eventually lower the interest rates, and that will, ironically enough, contribute to a decline in the CPI, right? So even if the Fed backtracks, it'll have that net positive effect. Fair argument to some degree. We need to consider that when it comes to financing. But the big thing here is that we're not seeing a slowdown in the housing market. As we talked about back a couple episodes ago, housing prices are still going up. You either have people who are paying cash in hand, about a third of the entire purchases in the housing market, much higher than where we were back when financing was around 2%. But on top of that, you've got housing prices that essentially have continued to stay elevated. Back in August, we had the biggest month-over-month growth in housing purchases month-over-month since over the last 40 years, minus July of 2020. So the housing market's still remaining strong here. The Fed's got to tighten even more. So again, why we continue to believe that if the Fed is using the CPI or PCE, that number is going to keep staying elevated. But put all that aside here, right? Well, we saw the stock market and crypto, which definitely more volatile, more chasing kind of short-term hopes because they are going to be rebounding much more significantly than any other markets out there during optimistic times or when things look pretty good or rosy. I want to go ahead and talk about what really matters here. What tells us whether or not the Fed is actually making any adjustments to its current trajectory. Whether or not the stock market, crypto, any other investment class outside of the more risk-off assets like treasuries and currency are going to actually rally. And well, simply we get our answer here from those two metrics. From the dollar index here, which declined about 0.7% yesterday, cutting back the last 2 or 3 days of gains here since around October 7th. And the metric I really want to focus on here, which is the United States 30-year government bond yield, or the treasury yield for the 30-year note. Now, to be honest with you all, as much as we did see a bump up in the 30-year yield yesterday, most of those gains faded. And we've been holding here since where we were back on October. So essentially what I want to bring up here, right, since October 10th, my apologies. What I want to bring up here is that for the past month, or the past week here, we've seen that the US 30-year yield has remained relatively flat. It certainly didn't pop up like, again, many perma bears were probably thinking, but at the same time, it didn't decline. So this tells us that the inflation reading, at least according to the bond market, doesn't change anything. It doesn't make things worse, but at the same time, the Federal Reserve can continue on its trajectory here of another 75 basis point hike in November and another one later on in the year before the close into 2023. Right now, people are rushing consecutively, month over month, week by week here. There's literally only been one red week here since back in July of 2022 for the US 30-year yield, right? Bonds are the preferred vehicle right now. Cash is the preferred vehicle right now. And until that starts to change, until those smart, hyper-efficient markets start to change, I'm not rushing into Bitcoin. It hasn't declined significantly since back in the summer, but to be completely fair as well, it hasn't also increased. All right, so again, guys, as much as the next guy, I'm looking for that opportunity. But I want to go ahead and dive into this interview with Rokfin. If you guys enjoyed the core part of this video, drop a like, and let's go ahead and kick off this conversation with Martin from Rokfin. All right, everyone. So in today's sponsored interview, I'm sitting down with Martin Floreani, who is the founder and CEO of Rokfin, one of our long-term partners here on the DataDash channel. Martin, thank you so much for making the time, man. I'm really excited to get to chat with you, learn a little bit more about your guys' vision, and dive a little bit into the Rokfin platform today.
Yeah, Nicholas, it's all my pleasure. Enjoy being here.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to go ahead and give a little bit of context here for those of you guys who are watching. This is a really special interview because I've not only been a fan of the Rokfin platform for some time, hence why we joined with them and started creating content. But in the interview today, we're actually going to go ahead and dive through the platform here. So people are going to be able to get a feel for what Rokfin is, what the RAE token is, the native utility token of the platform, and just get a feel for what kind of content you can get exposed to and really the business model of Rokfin as a platform. So Martin, just curious, like maybe you could take us through a little bit about what Rokfin is, who you and the team are, and what's your guys' long-term vision, and kind of a quick elevator pitch.
Absolutely. So from a user perspective, it's real simple. Rokfin is a content subscription platform. Users can come on, they can come and watch their favorite creators for free. Sometimes if their creators' content is behind a paywall, they can pay one easy payment of $10 a month to access all of the creators' content on the platform. But from a creator's perspective is where it really gets interesting. And from that perspective, it's a whole new way for content creators to better monetize their content. And underneath the hood is Web3 mechanics driving it all.
Got it. Very interesting, man. So let's go ahead. If you want, I could go ahead and just showcase real quick, and then I'd love you to kind of go through maybe like a library of some of the content creators here. I was going to go ahead and just showcase my Rokfin account here, just for those who might watch the channel. We've got around a little bit under 1,200 followers here. And as you can see, some of my normal YouTube content will get posted here, so you guys can capture a lot of my normal uploads here on the channel. But also you can get access to premium content. So the way I kind of explain it, to the point you were talking about earlier, Martin, is that Rokfin kind of embodies like 3 of my favorite applications. It embodies YouTube as a content platform, Patreon as kind of a way to support content creators, and Netflix. Because when you subscribe to Rokfin as a platform at the current moment, you're not only going to get access to the kind of premium content that I do, which is generally focused on, kind of premium trading content that explains how to break down market analysis. But outside of that as well, you're also getting access to all the content creators on Rokfin, which makes it, again, this kind of subscription model similar to that on Netflix. So am I got that right overall, like kind of in the value proposition?
Yeah, yes, I'd say so. You nailed it. It's very similar to Patreon in terms of being able to support your favorite content creators, but content creators get this added benefit with the bundle. And so because they get to place their content in a bundle, the economics for the content creator go way up. They're able to get more of their fans to sign up. Those fans are willing to pay a higher price point because they not only get your content, they get a whole slew of other people's content, and they stay on longer. And so when you dial those 3 knobs for content creators, the economic output that they get is a whole lot larger, right? Because you're affecting 3 parts of the equation that are major inputs to how they get paid.
Absolutely, man. I think it's a very beautiful system, because I think there's been a lot of like ways that allow for independent content creators to thrive like on the web, but being able to build a model that, again, keeps in all those 3 factors, I hadn't seen anything like that before. And for me, it's what made Rokfin stand out. There's like a lot of like alternative YouTube apps out there, kind of alternative content platforms, but Rokfin, I think, is kind of in a league of its own, and it's why it's got such a good foundation that's helped to propel. But I think one of the best things that we could talk about, maybe to just kind of get understanding of how valuable Rokfin is potentially as a subscription, is the kind of content library that you guys offer. So I don't know if you want to, Martin. I know I've got some of the big names on there that I like listening to and kind of tuning into, but do you have any that you're a big fan of personally?
Yeah, I love a lot of the different content creators, and some of the most popular ones on the platform are content creators like Eddie Bravo, Jimmy Dore, Conspiracy Social Club with Brian Callen and Sam Tripoli. You have a whole slew, and then you have a sports vertical, combat sports vertical, that's growing rapidly within wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So those are some of the hot spots within Rokfin.
And one of the big things as well is like for content creators that I think is interesting as an additional revenue stream, if people want to support their content creators that they like even more, they can even go and engage in like a tipping mechanism, right? So you can tip them for specific content that you really like. And that just opens up another revenue stream for content creators to stay on the platform and continue building value there, which I think, again, it's like this perpetual positive feedback loop that just keeps making Rokfin as a platform more interesting, bringing unique minds to there and generating a lot of good content.
Right on. That we obsess over how to optimize for content creators, because really, and part of that is making sure that there's a great user experience, but also from a monetization end, how do we give the best economic engine for content creators to get most out of a platform and be part of a network? And when you do that, more content creators come, and they are they are the underpinning of all these networks, like YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely.
YouTube without content creators is nothing, right? And so our obsession is strategically focused on the content creators, and then also just doing right, by doing right by with them and aligning the long-term and short-term interests of the content creator with the platform creates just an overall environment and ecosystem that is collaborative and it's healthy. It's fun to be a part of beyond the economic impact that we make for the content creators.
On that point though, Martin, as well, like around like building this network effect, I think people have a difficult time understanding just how like difficult and challenging it is to really start from nothing and build those networks. And I think you guys have built a sustainable one. You've got thousands upon thousands of users on the application on a daily and monthly recurring basis. But I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about RAE token, because while Rokfin as a platform is really cool, I think you guys have one of the more interesting utility token models out there. And I think, as some people probably know from the channel, I've advised for a few projects, and one of them was a project called Unibright. They have a utility token model that I really got behind. I think utility tokens, beyond governance tokens, beyond STOs, all kinds of stuff out there are really kind of the bread and butter for allowing people to be a part of adoption and growth in a platform, whether it be the content creators themselves, whether it be participants on the network. So I would love, in this case, Martin, maybe we could dive in a little bit here. I know you guys have a web page here on the website that goes through and talks a little bit about why RAE token can be seen as a valuable play long-term, how it allows you to kind of participate in this growth, and how it really solves what you guys call the creator's dilemma. Can you dive into this a little bit and maybe just kind of explain to people what this is all about?
Absolutely. So, like, where do we start? So, RAE token is a access token. So, and basically, what type of utility token? It's an access token, and to access the content on the network, the platform must burn. For every dollar that comes into the ecosystem, it must burn the equivalent amount of RAE. So this is a very important fundamental concept to understand, because if RAE is trading at $1 and we have $10 that comes into the ecosystem, Rokfin must burn 10 RAE, right? $10, there's $1 per RAE, that means 10 RAE. Now, if RAE token price dropped to 10 cents, Rokfin must burn 100 RAE to satisfy its requirements to creators. So there's already, Nicholas, 30,000 paying subscribers on the network. And RAE token started as a fair token, 0, right? It started at a fair launch. It started at 0. There's no founder's reward. There's no ICO. There's no pre-mine. There's no investor class that gets inside track to a whole bunch of other tokens. It started at 0. No one got any edge whatsoever. And because of that, RAE is actually scarce. And so I think you're going to find there's about 7+ million RAE token right now in existence. And so you can do the math. If RAE token dropped to 10 cents, Rokfin would have to burn 3 million RAE. Well, that's half the RAE. And these subscribers, as you noted, are sticky. They're sticky because with each additional creator that comes on the platform, their subscription improves. Their value of their subscription goes up. And so as we add more creators and the subscription gets better, their retention stays longer. And so that creates a dynamic where this RAE token becomes even more scarce.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's it's what we call a burn and mint mechanism that really underpins the mechanics that make RAE token an actual utility token and why it's so important. And I'll say, because of these mechanics, it really aligns our not only short-term interests with the creators, but also long-term interests with creators. And we all know how these networks start out. They start out by being angels to content creators. They start out treating them like kings. They very, very great rules. The spirit of how they start is one of collaboration, openness, transparency. And as that network strengthens, and as more and more creators add to it, and their network effects get stronger and stronger, at some point the tables flip, right? And the network is able to turn the screws on the creator from both a monetization perspective, but then also a rules perspective. And the spirit of how that network started is totally forgotten. That's by the wayside. And why? Because the network owns the customer, they own the data, and they can do that. And so with RAE, because Rokfin sits on top of this RAE ecosystem, it's just a lot harder for the platform to do that. And we're one of many platforms that will ultimately join the RAE ecosystem. So that's the element behind RAE token. And we believe not only does it make a stronger and better network, we believe in the end, it's so much better way for society to live. We believe the implications are much more beyond just the network of RAE token that we're creating, but it just creates a much more healthy balance and relationship between the creators of the network and the platform that served the creators.
Yeah, on that point, Martin, like, I think about some of the greatest technology network effect startups that have ballooned into these gigantic companies. I mean, you can take YouTube under the ownership of Google. There's no way that a content creator early on, especially those who are the first adopters or the first, 1,000, 10,000 creators, they didn't really grow with YouTube. Many of them, again, just became a part of a cog in the machine. They never got recognized. They never were able to benefit from continuing to contribute to the platform outside of just generating, a bit of ad revenue here and there, part of the cut, which YouTube takes about half of anyways. I mean, it's really exciting to see that there's this kind of new, what I think might see as experimental, but I think it's pretty foundational because overall, again, as you guys mentioned, as the platform's growing, RAE is going to become more and more scarce. And that should be beneficial, again, in the long term for price. No guarantee that anything's going to happen, but generally speaking, that sets a fundamental demand for the token. And I think that's why the utility token model for it's so powerful.
Yeah. The rules definitely change on these folks. And we've seen one cycle of it, right? Maybe we saw the first 10, 12-year cycle of like what happens with YouTube, what happens with all these different platforms and how the rules have changed and how the spirit of the agreement, sure, made it legal, quote unquote, but the spirit of how that network was formulated is really upended. And that's why you'll see people get very frustrated and angry, emotional around that, because that's not how the network started. And in fact, it was never in their best interest to act the way they're acting right now. They would have never gotten to the point where they're at. And you have to also understand is the only reason they're there is because of the content creators. Yeah. Without the content creators, YouTube is nothing. But they don't act as a group, they act individually. Right. Yeah. And that's why YouTube can treat them this way. They can essentially discriminate against 1, 2, 3, because they're a fragmented base, or they don't act as a whole. And so and they do everything because they own the data, they can obfuscate the data. They can sway things the way they want with their algorithm or other different facets, and there's less ability to hold YouTube accountable. Yeah. And so that's the frustration. And we think that by putting this implementation into place, does it solve every single problem to the nth degree? No. Does it make a lot harder for a platform to act dishonestly with creators? Hell yes. It makes it a lot more difficult, and it creates an ecosystem of much more openness and transparency, which should add to the relationship between platforms and their creators.
I gotta say, Martin, like that's music to my ears, man, because I've used YouTube since 2007, and each year while YouTube gets bigger, and I still love YouTube, it's where I spend a lot of my time and stuff consuming content. I gotta tell you, man, like this is the kind of stuff that I think content creators have been longing to hear for a long time. And it's, again, as you mentioned, if you're swaying those content creators to come in, I have to say I've loved working with Rokfin. The platform, uploading everything is smooth. It didn't feel like it was some kind of pain, like when I used a lot of the alternative content platforms out there. It felt clean. Like you guys have built a really nice product. And again, I think the fundamental vision long-term is great. And I think one of the big things that, like, again, put all of our words, our philosophy long-term for the product aside, what I love is in the metrics. And I'll put it up on the screen here. The metrics showcase that, as you mentioned, you've got that stickiness when it comes to users who are engaging in the subscription. They're setting that base foundation for the RAE token and participation within Rokfin. I think these are really like your power users who are engaging in the comments in the community. And you guys have got a really solid foundation. I mean, for being this early on as a content platform to have this kind of traction, and also bear in mind, as you can see in the chart, have it maintained throughout the bull and the bear market. I think that is incredibly telling about where you guys are going in the long term. Each cycle, I think, is just going to add fuel to the fire to growing Rokfin as a platform. And you can see that people stick around. Like, that's just not something we're seeing in any DeFi protocols or layer one protocols. All the traction's really dropped off with the market, but you guys are staying around. So this kind of, I think, gets to a point too that you guys aren't just a Web3, project. You use elements from Web3, but in reality, you guys are much more of a traditional kind of Web2 platform, maybe 2.5, if you will.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's really frustrating even hearing people talk about Web3, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these token projects, as we all know, they're just pie in the sky. There's no real anchor into reality. And they do a disservice to the powerfulness of crypto and what crypto can be in the future. And so, yeah, I mean, our project is anchored into reality, and maybe people don't like it because of that, and maybe people love it because of that. And we sit in this like this interesting space, right, where business people don't like our project because it's got crypto element. And then other crypto people are like, wait, what? It actually has real life utility.
It has revenue and traction.
It has traction, and it's like not all pie in the sky. Oh, we're just looking for the next, pump and dump. And so it's the project is unique in that way, but we're fine with being unique because ultimately crypto and what this use case on how better to serve the supply side to marketplace networks is going to be the standard over the next 10 years. Mark my words, it is a whole better way of rewarding these creators, the people that are doing the actual work on the supply side. And guess what? Once a network or a protocol captures the supply side, it captures the network. Why? Because their supply, 95% of all marketplace networks are supply side constrained. Meaning, once you get the supply side on board, the people that are actually doing the work, the demand follows. And so that is a key component that drives our underlying thesis and hypothesis of just continually doing right by the content creators. One, it's the right thing to do, but then two, it's also the winning formula. So that's what we obsess over, and we'll continue to obsess over with RAE token.
That's awesome, Martin. And one last thing I wanted to kind of ask you about is like, Rokfin as a platform has become very established. You guys are constantly making improvements to it, but kind of people know what to expect when they use Rokfin as a platform. And I think, again, that's why you guys have found really good product market fit and have built a really nice company. But I'm curious, it sounds like from what you were talking about, what we've chatted about before in private is around this idea of Rokfin, or the RAE token more specifically, having more use elsewhere and kind of expanding its network effect, kind of being this core currency, or if you will, or utility token within this entire network of different platforms, maybe even outside of Rokfin as well. So I'm curious to hear, like, what are your guys' goals in the next couple of months, the next year or so, for Rokfin as a platform, for RAE token? What are some of the big things you could maybe hint towards, or things that you guys are considering working towards?
So one thing we're working towards is adding other platforms onto to collaborate with Rokfin platform and with the content, where content can be shared seamlessly across different platforms, both utilizing the underlying mechanics of RAE token. So that's the first thing. Second thing, RAE token's great for the content creators. Okay, how do we make it great for the users, right? How can users be more a part of what's going on with RAE token? And so that does it do one thing we are working in implementing is an ability for creators to launch their own NFT. Now it has some different underlying structural elements that we have to make sure to get right when we launch it, because we've been looking at this for a few quarters. But the idea is being able to launch their own NFTs to token gate their content, or token gate with RAE token, but maybe also with the NFT. And so if their fan base has this exclusive NFT, this specific creator NFT, they can get access to maybe another room with this particular creator. Also, maybe these NFTs have an element where they're tied into the success of the channel, so that if a user does stake that particular NFT, they get rewards for doing so, right? And had now users can actually be a part of the creator's success, right? That you can have 500 of your top users. Now they're also your marketing channels. They're pumping up your channel because they feel a part, because they're tied into some of the rewards that your channel gets, right? And so all these different elements, having top leaderboards where rewards are distributed out in RAE token, all these different little elements to get the users more engaged around RAE is a path we're going, in addition to adding additional platforms. So there's a whole slew of implications that what I talked to you about, that infrastructure that needs to be laid to execute that properly and elegantly, which would be how we'd want to do it. But that's what we're really excited about moving in the future.
I gotta say, Martin, because I know we've chatted a bit about this over the last couple of months of working together, about this idea of expanding beyond just Rokfin as an app. And I think that alone is already really exciting for RAE. But the idea of utilizing NFTs, not just as a gateway to content, but as this kind of way where you can open up people's potential to almost, for example, like imagine you're like a small time content creator, people are really liking your content. And if only you could have a better camera setup or a better mic, or, get someone who can help make a perfect intro, or help set up a studio so you can boost your content. And you do basically like an NFT raise for your channel. I mean, that's very exciting. I mean, that's where I could see NFTs being very interesting, investing in individuals. Individuals and the content creators are very scarce, and their revenue potential, again, people want to be part of that. So, man, I got to tell you, there's a lot of exciting things. I'm glad you've been thinking about that for a while, because I think if you can implement something like that, that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense too, and you got to understand, it's like there's no all this other element. It's all on chain. It's all visible. Everyone sees it. It all happens automatically.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of paperwork out, and it's just like, hey, yeah, I want to help out Nicholas, and I'm getting rewards for doing that in the future. The next content creator that I see is up and coming. It's these are the type of things that just really excite us as a group, of continue to build on and use the ethos that crypto really started with, and actually bring it to reality, where it's just a healthier network. It's a healthier ecosystem. It's a healthier relationship between all the parties, because everyone can see what's happening. It's all open. It's all transparent. And those are the things that get us out of bed.
Absolutely, man. No, I love your guys' focus of utilizing components of crypto to accelerate an existing business model. And it's not just, oh, we're in crypto, everyone get excited. It's actually utilizing these core principles. I mean, again, back to that point I was thinking about, like with the NFT and stuff, that right there will help you find your moderators for live streams and content creation, people who will market. I mean, that's huge, man. That again just propels the network effect. So I was curious overall, Martin, like we now have a good idea about kind of the future, where things are going and stuff. Just curious, if people wanted to get more engaged with Rokfin, what are some of the ways they can do that? Because I know I'm going to leave a link down below in the description for you guys to sign up for Rokfin if you guys want to go check it out. There's some great free content there. You can explore the app, give it a go, just try it out. But maybe if they wanted to get more engaged as well, Martin, outside of checking out the link down below, are there any other places that they could go to, maybe following some of you guys over on Twitter, joining the Twitter spaces? Are there any good areas where people could go to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a Twitter Spaces the second Wednesday of every month, where we talk about RAE ecosystem and where it's going and the things that are on its roadmap, and then also taking in suggestions from the RAE community. We have obviously our Rokfin Twitter, our Rokfin. We're on TikTok. You can follow us there, and you can always email us support@rokfin.com. And so, yep, those are the different ways. And if you're a content creator, come apply to be a content creator. Join the ecosystem. If you're making great content and you have even a somewhat of a following, a couple thousand Twitter followers, we think that the platform would be great for you to kick it off. And we'd love to have you distribute your content using RAE ecosystem mechanics.
Awesome. Well, Martin, dude, thank you so much for making the time, man. I mean, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. We got to show some people some pretty cool insights throughout the call around what you guys are doing. I think you've built a phenomenal startup from one founder to another. I'm so happy to see that you guys have been able to really nail this business model, that you guys are making this huge bet on the utility token, the value that I can resonate with that a lot as well. But again, if you guys are interested and you want to check out Rokfin, see some of my content, some of the content from people like Martin had mentioned earlier, like Jimmy Dore, Eddie Bravo, all the kind of people you can find over on Rokfin, a lot of interesting different content creators from all different perspectives and interests. You can check out the link down below in the description. And yeah, but anyways, Martin, thank you so much for making the time, and this was really interesting. We'll have to have you back on the channel in the future, man.
Sounds good, Nicholas. Great to be here. Thanks.